Thanks so much, everyone. I was unable to be here right at the start because we were recording a podcast. My apologies. My name is Wael Taji Miller, and I'm the research coordinator and senior researcher at the Axioma Center in Budapest. We're a Christian think tank, public policy think tank that also engages in academic work, including peer-reviewed studies, research, etc., founded on the Christian principles of faith and reason. And we pursue the true, the beautiful, and the good. I am a doctoral candidate in neuroscience at Semmelweis University, and the project that I'm about to present is somewhat influenced by that background. I should also mention that Axioma is in a collaboration with Pázmány Péter Katholikus Egyetem, Catholic University, a relationship that we are very grateful for and we take a great deal of pride in. And we look forward to continuing with projects such as the one I'm about to introduce, and also other projects in the future. So thank you very much for this opportunity. I will now attempt to share my screen. So thank you very much. So the title of this today is a little cheeky. It's AI and the Death of Creativity, which is actually the name of a previous project I did before joining the Axioma Center, which is the basis for the current project that we're working on now. So I'm going to start by talking about that previous project a little bit. So back in 2022, in August, the first open source, what would you say, image generation model that was available universally worldwide for anyone to use for free if they had the computational resources to support it was launched. And this is called Stable Diffusion. And at the time, I published an article about this in which I made a series of concrete predictions. So just first, let's start with some information about Stable Diffusion and what it is. It is a diffusion model. The way that diffusion models work is depicted here on the screen. You can see that essentially the model is trained in deconstructing an image into noise. And then with the saved data of each point along from the x0 to the x1 to the x2, it can then reconstruct these images in reverse. And that's reverse diffusion. So Stable Diffusion was the first model using these techniques that essentially allowed you to go both ways. It was released onto the public internet in August of 2022 and enabled sort of radical free image generation to anyone all around the world for the first time. So yeah, this allowed you to do things like this. And of course, the implications of that were immediately obvious, I think, to everyone. This was the first time we were opening up this gateway into a brave new world, let's say, of post-truth. And please keep in mind that this is actually before the release of ChatGPT for the first time. So text to text generation was not yet available, but text to image generation was. And on the basis of this, I made some predictions. Yeah, there are things like this. So first of all, it's important to remember that this came at a time when digital artistry was at the highest level of demand, as high as it will ever be in human history, because now, of course, that's declining. And so the inference that it was possible to make, which was quite easy, is that due to the technological adoption of essentially AI performed or LLM performed digital artistry on demand, the necessity to maintain a stock of skills, and I would like to sort of make this very clear and keep it in our minds as we go ahead. Like skills do not exist in the abstract. They also do not exist in books. Skills are embodied in human minds, right? In human minds and human bodies. Skills are things that are within us. So without the demand for the maintenance of those skills would then decline. So here's just a quick overview of just some of my predictions. I also used, I should say, I have a background in behavioral economics, and so I'm fond of their sort of terminologies. But yeah, Carlota Perez, the development economist who studies the development of technology, basically had published prior 20 years ago a depiction of these cycles, these big 50-year cycles that correspond to Kondratiev waves in the development of technology. And yeah, as a coincidence, by 2022, when I was writing this, we were overdue a cycle. It was in fact time for a new cycle. And so my prediction, what I did is I basically said, okay, this is, oh gosh, how can I get rid of this? I basically said this would be our next cycle with Stable Diffusion. Of course, in retrospect, you can say I was wrong because it's ChatGPT, not Stable Diffusion, that ended up catalyzing this big bang. But it happened a few months after I predicted. And okay, I also, yeah, so as I mentioned, I predicted that true human creativity would be discouraged. And this could lead to a skill shortage and a technological collapse because knowledge isn't being passed on or inherited anymore. So I want to read this quote from Jared Diamond here. Inventions don't just get adopted once and forever. They have to be constantly transmitted, practiced and transmitted, I'm sorry, or useful techniques may be forgotten. So that's from 10,000 Years of Solitude. And this is one of the predictions I made among others. And initially the goal was to study this, to study, okay, how is human creativity declining perhaps as a consequence of this? But then our decision was to continue this along another direction. So again, what's being described here is essentially the collapse of a micro society within a society. So these are also called social niches. And these niches are modeled by complex systems dynamics researchers, people like Peter Turchner, for example, who is an advisor, I should say, an informal advisor on this project. Another informal advisor is Professor Cody Moser at Mohammed VI Polytechnic University in Morocco, who works at the School of Intelligence and is helping with some of the methods of getting into this project that I'm about to introduce. But we were looking at a specific socioeconomic niche of creative industry. And so the collapse of a niche or a microculture, it's harder to verify than a whole system's collapse. What Turchin is talking about is a whole system collapsing. What we're looking at is AI basically causing a system within a system to collapse. And so you can see this is what social niche construction looks like from the framework of systems ecology. And what I want to draw your attention to is the interactions on the top right between the ecological system and the sociocultural system. So the skills that we have, the knowledge that we have, that belongs to the sociocultural system. You can see that there at the top right. But of course, that's interacting with the ecological system, which is to say the immediate environment, what's around you. And then how that environment is being utilized by people, that of course feeds into the socio-ecological system. So if we just look at this very complex looking graph and we step back for a second, what this is basically saying is that as technology changes, the ecology changes. And so the ways that we use technology actually do shape us. They shape the skills that we have. They shape the skills that we hand on. And if you look at the right side of the image there, you can see sociocultural inheritance. Like what we are able to inherit or what we are likely to pass on changes as technology makes some things more worthwhile and other things less worthwhile. So this social niche collapse, it happens at a point of a critical transition. On the right, you see a paper from Schaefer et al. This is actually an older one, 2009. And it describes a critical transition from like a lush forest to like a barren desert, essentially. And you can see that it happens in stages, but there's a certain point, that critical transition point from which you can't go back. This is something that we also see in human niches of human cultural knowledge as well. So I have a few examples listed on the left. One of them is Roman concrete. Essentially, what happened in early Roman history is as the Western Roman Empire tragically fell, there was not architectural knowledge was not transmitted or preserved because it simply wasn't worthwhile to do so when people were trying to defend themselves from, for example, the Huns, who are not the same as the modern Hungarians, I believe. But also outside of Rome, we have in other contexts the Rongo writing system of Rapa Nui, which is also called Easter Island, was completely lost sometime after the first contact with Europeans. They stopped passing down the system. The knowledge was lost and it was gone forever. Another one is medieval Byzantine Christian architecture. I don't think we could build the Hagia Sophia today. As I said, this is an Orthodox Christian. It makes me quite sad, but I don't think we could build it today. And even the medieval Latin language, this one is more debatable because, of course, we still have all the records of medieval Latin. We have schools that teach medieval Latin, but we no longer have the medieval Latin university within which that language was a living, vibrant tradition. So, of course, this one's more debatable, and maybe I'm trying to provoke some controversy here, but this is the kind of collapse of knowledge-based niches that I'm talking about investigating for this project. And so what we want to do is basically build resilience in knowledge systems pertaining to Christian culture in the era of generative AI. So what this involves is identifying network structures, their vitality, their resilience, and everything pertaining to human knowledge and social learning that is theological and creative. So I just gave a few examples of domains that we will investigate. Icon painting, a beautiful, priceless Christian art. It's also in decline. People are increasingly choosing to generate their own icons using artificial intelligence instead of paying an iconographer to make one. That may have an impact down the line. This is one of the things we'll investigate. Theological education. This is, unfortunately, it's something we don't really like to admit is happening, but it is happening. More and more people are turning to ChatGPT as their personal theological advisor or pastor. And of course, the church will always exist. Priests will always be, the liturgy will always be sung, but the sort of on the micro level of theological education, the sort of the advisors, the church schools, stuff like this, demand for that may be affected also by the use of generative AI. This is something we also want to investigate. Liturgical singing. This is probably an example of a more robust knowledge-based system, right? Because for singing, you can't really get an AI to sing for you or to teach you how to sing. But it's an example of a knowledge-based system that also falls under the scope of this project. And then finally, just Christian elite traditions more generally. Traditions that are living, embodied in human beings and in institutions. These are what we're investigating. So the methods, basically, I mentioned the two sort of advisors that we have on this project who are more heavily involved in the methods than I am, but this involves cartography, so mapping out Christian knowledge-based network structures using quantitative sociology and psychology. It involves modeling, so we want to use quantitative agent-based modeling to reconstruct these networks and see how they interact with others in the ecology. We want to simulate the intervention, so the intervention is basically AI running iterative simulations to see if there are you can look at it through a prisoner's dilemma context as like the AI is defection, right? Do I do my art myself or do I get the AI to do it for me? This is the classic prisoner's dilemma case. And so we want to run these for each system to explore vulnerabilities and test resilience. And then adjustments, finally. We want to, in our simulations, test how these network structures can be made more resilient in the face of future probable AI intrusions. So what we hope to achieve, this is not the same thing as predicting the future of AI, not predicting, where is AI going to be in 5 years. Instead, we're trying to understand what are the forms of knowledge in Christian culture that are instantiated in social institutions, embedded in networks that will be affected by AI. And when we assess the human dependencies in these networks, we can quantify resilience, we can quantify robustness, and we can basically get a sense of how to build a future for Christian institutions, Christian knowledge that coexists with AI. Thank you very much for your attention. And that is